Hi everybody and welcome to another Semrush webinar. Today we're here with Lennox Powell and we're going to be looking at content both from a perspective of how to make it better, but also a perspective of how to make it better for Google and your users. And I think that's the most interesting point. And you're going to be talking specifically about Semrush because you actually are the content lead. Is that what you're called for Semrush?
Yeah, director or content director. So I oversee our content. Sounds so fancy. No, I'm a content director and I oversee just an incredible team of writers and content creators within Semrush.
Right, and that's really interesting because you're a content writer who works on content in the SEO industry within the context of a very specialized and very powerful tool. And that makes you spectacularly exciting and interesting as a person to have on a webinar.
Thanks. I hope that's interesting. It interests and excites me a lot. I nerd out about this stuff all the time. I could talk about content creation, the optimization of it all day long, because I think it is anytime you talk about SEO, anytime you talk about even PPC or social media or any type of marketing, from my brain anyway, my world is the content is really at the core of that. Content branches out. It's like a sun, and all the rays branch out into all the other elements of marketing. So I have a lot of respect for content, and I have a great deal of respect for the people who take the time to actually create and to write it, because it's a lot of work to create not just content, but effective content.
Right, and actually sitting down and saying, what do I need to communicate to my audience? And I think that's the key, is I need to look at my audience. What do they need or want to know? How can I communicate with them in an effective manner where they become closer to me as a brand and a person, in my case?
100%. Exactly. We tend to write a lot there's a different schools of thought depending on who you ask. There's, in my perspective, you shouldn't write just for a search engine. That shouldn't be the ultimate goal. You're writing for a human being. Now, you definitely want to optimize that content to also support the search engine. But at the end of the day, for me, regardless of how you optimize it to draw traffic, you want to talk to a person. It's the person you want to engage with your content. So that's some of the stuff we're going to be talking about when we review, not tear down. We'll be very gentle, but review these blog posts.
Right, and I think that's a really important point. We're writing for people, and what we're doing in terms of SEO for the search engines is simply packaging it so that those search engines, Bing, Google, Yahoo, Quant, whatever it might be, can then present it to their users who are still people. So at the end of the day, we're always writing for people, and the only part that Google comes in is this intermediary that we need to package it so they know which of its users, who are your audience, they should be presenting your content to.
Exactly.
Oh, delightful. We agree. Yeah. Wonderful. Now, what I do like about this is people have submitted their blog posts for analysis by an expert who is Lennox, who is using an incredibly powerful tool from Semrush. And we're not going to tear it down. We're not going to be nasty. We're going to try to be constructive to show people what it is they can do to make this content better packaged, let's say, for Google. And take it away, please.
All right. Hopefully my slides are all working here. So thank you for that. And hello, everyone. So glad you could join us today. We're super excited to talk about this topic. And I want to start off by sharing that my perspective about content creation. I really do believe that there's an art and a science to creating, as I had mentioned before, that word effective content. There's a lot of content out in the world, but most people should have goals around it. But whereas, the art part of it, that's where it's more subjective. It involves things like storytelling and creativity and communication and metaphors and analogies, which are my favorite things to talk about. But the science part also tends to involve a lot of the data and the measurement and the experimentation and the analysis. And both are really, really crucial in terms of content creation. It's about finding a healthy balance between the two to ultimately produce more effective content. And that mentality really reflects what we're going to be discussing on this webinar today, how to develop and how to refine content, blog posts in this case, that really helps you reach your goals, whatever they may be. So something that I also think is important to know is that to save time and ensure that we're not going down too many analysis rabbit holes, which is easy to do with content, we're reviewing these posts under 4 general assumptions. And those are really that you have the people writing this, the individuals who've written this content have taken into consideration, they've given thought to why they are wanting to write this post in the first place. Ideally, that why it certainly should be attached to some kind of a business goal, but it also should really be thinking about your audience. Why would they care about it? Why they want to reach and speak to this particular audience. I have a term I often use is boil the ocean. You can't boil the ocean. And just like if you try to speak to too many people, you'll ultimately end up speaking to no one. So it's very valuable to know why you want to write it, but then what are you really trying to say? And who are you trying to say that to? What's the problem, what's the pain point, the concern, the need that your intended reader, your ideal reader has around this content? And then we're also making assumptions that keyword research was conducted prior to this. Keyword research, all that front end element of content creation from especially an SEO perspective is really vital. There are lots of tools out there to do this. Semrush, of course, has incredible tools, but we're not going into that piece today. We're just assuming it was done. And I do have some insight into keywords that the writers provided to us around that. So the last thing I want to say related to this is before we evaluate these posts through an art and science lens, I really want to preface this review by saying that it can be done using a variety of tools. This is not meant to just be this, walkthrough of a Semrush tool. Other tools can be very helpful to do these kinds of things we're going to be talking about. Google, certainly various browser extensions. So by no means does it need to be done using Semrush tools. I'm going to be using a few for just the purposes and ease and to streamline this evaluation. But the point is that what we're going to be looking at, you should be doing regardless of what tools you use. So with all that said, let's dive in. Okay, so our first blog post we'll be reviewing, submitted by Casey. Thank you, Casey, for sharing your post with us. And this is his published post. And Casey actually provided us with insight into his goal for this particular post, which was to build up authority for this topic and create a pillar page around the primary keyword. In this case, it's what is Active Directory. And a pillar page is just a structure. It's a type. It could be off your blog post. It could just be a page on your site, but a pillar page is a strategy that sometimes are used in blog posts as well. And they tend to have a lot of links and talk about a main topic with a lot of different topics within. But his objective was to segment the post using other keywords. So his main keyword, what is Active Directory, and then some other keywords that also branched out to other posts and other articles. So let's give this review first through what I call the art lens. And to simplify and expedite this, I actually copied and pasted his post into a Google Doc. Again, just to hopefully make this easier for you all to review or to see. And the first thing I'm going to talk about here is the title. So he, in his post, chose to use his keyword in his title, which can certainly be good. It is important to put keywords in your title and also your title tag. So getting into a little bit of the SEO element here pretty early, but you have your header for your post, but then you also have a title tag. And that appears on the search engine results page and can and should be shorter than the header of your post. So usually around 55 to 60 characters. And it's definitely okay to have your blog header be longer. And in fact, many pros would say that's ideal because it allows you to convey more of the benefit to what your content is really offering to your reader and why it's worth their time to continue reading on. So on top of all that, you have about less than a second to make that point. So your headline is really, really, really important. It really cannot be overstated. What it takes to create an effective headline is writing a lot of headlines. It's the keyword research. It's the competitor analysis. Pros don't just come up with one headline. They tend to write a dozen or more. And then they evaluate them as, using a ton of resources, Google, and people also ask, and maybe Semrush tools or whatever, and they're looking at a variety of factors. A side note, if you do use Semrush, the on-page SEO checker can actually be a really helpful tool when it comes to your headline, because it can show you how many of your competitors, the ones that are really ranking better than you for these keywords, how they're using their target keywords in the titles, and also how often. So just a little note about headlines. I wanted to dive in a little bit more for this one. The other two blog posts, I'm not going to spend as much time talking about the headline importance because we've just covered that. One thing I was excited to see here is Casey included a table of contents in his post. And a table of contents can provide a better user experience for your reader. And it makes it easier for them to scan your content. It can also help increase the chance of your post getting a featured snippet in search results, and just it's overall good for SEO to do a table of contents if you can, if it's appropriate for your post. So he's done a good job with that. And in fact, in the actual post, I'll just jump here really quick, you can see he has them all anchored into other areas. So if they click on that, it's just a quick shortcut for the reader to go into the post. The how behind that is a little bit more complex because it can involve some HTML. It doesn't always have to, but covered on another training. Something I called out here in my notes when I was reading through this and the other blog posts is this particular subhead. It left me going, who is he really trying to talk to here? Great that he has a subhead, good breaking up of the post. But when I read through this content below it, the subhead confused me a bit. I was thinking, is he trying to help his reader better explain Active Directory? Or is it more of a conversation that he's trying to have with his audience to say, how to explain Active Directory? I'm thinking the latter, but that when I read through the content, something along the lines of like Active Directory, a brief history, could be more compelling for the reader, especially because he's going into a bit of the history of Active Directory. Can still get the keywords in there, but that is something to consider. It's always about your reader first, at least from my perspective of content, and then looking at it through that SEO lens as well. So internal linking, he's done a good job here. He's included internal links, which are great. They connect your content. They help bolster other pieces of content that you have. Definitely can be good to boost SEO and help Google have a better idea of the structure of your website. So internal linking, good to do when it's done well and tactfully and not overdone. As I was reading through this, I kept trying to figure out who this content was for. And for me, it wasn't clearly addressed in the blog post. So even including a section of the who and the why in a subhead can be really valuable to your audience. So there's all this information about Active Directory, but who should care about Active Directory? What kind of roles are they in? Why should they care about it? That piece for me was missing from this blog post and is a great opportunity that could be added in to help take it from good to great. The other thing, again, calling out subheads, H2 subheads, H3 subheads, it's all a part of your blog structure and can help the reader find the content they need quickly and effectively instead of just having it be a bunch of text. Images are great. I noticed that he put in images throughout, also help break up the text. We'll mention this when we look at the science lens to make sure you want to make sure all of your images have alt text, but we'll talk about that when we look at the tool, the SEO writing tool. So again, more images in here. Something I want to call out, well, it'll come in just a second. As we get to this section, the transition felt a little abrupt. So he's talking about this information and then all of a sudden it goes to here, and then to this gray area of a bunch of links. Now, I know he wants to do a pillar page with this, so I understand kind of where he's going with this, But the transition felt a little abrupt of how this portion of the text connected with this little chart here. So easy fix, just put a bit of a transition explaining how they're connected, and then saying something along the lines of, and to learn more about specific Active Directory services to tie it back together. Other thing here is pillar page lens, but this is just text with a link. It would be really helpful for the reader and for Google to put a bit of a snippet here of copy about, so what are Active Directory domain services? Put a sentence or two in here about that. And they can learn more if they click on it, but a little sentence or two can break up and add content as opposed to just links. And you'll see that also in the science evaluation of this, of where SEO and SEO checker will catch something like that. I really like this picture here that he included. And a big reason for that is because it's telling a story. So as opposed to something like this or something like this just is additional copy here. And it's an image with copy. It doesn't really say much about the section. It doesn't really add a lot of value for the reader. It does break up the text. But this is a good example of something that is telling a story about the information, about what he is trying to convey with the whole forest through the trees and how domains and everything else fit into that. One thing I did note is that he put a little link to see the full inactive diagram. Not really needed. Just again, it's another link in your post, but not really needed for this one. So probably could remove that one. But I do like the image a lot. I like images that can tell a story or really bring to light what you're trying to convey. Then as we get kind of towards the bottom of the post, I noticed that this section here, so this is good information. He's talking about a section of the post, he's giving good insight with it, and then it gets down to here, and then it's just this H2 subhead, this little short sentence, and then a link. And I think that this is a real opportunity to build this out more. Maybe it doesn't need to be an H2. Maybe it should be an H3 because it might be a subsection of the other section. But explain a little bit more about the why, the so what. Why does your reader care about this section? What value does this convey to them? So there's opportunity there to say more. He has his final thoughts or his conclusion section. But there's no call to action. So if you think of reading a book or watching a movie, it tells a story. Your content, whether you're talking about Active Directory or you're talking about coffee or whatever it is, it needs some sort of conclusion. Wrap it up. Put that bow on it. What are you looking to for your reader to do next? Because without a call to action, it kind of just truncates your text. And they're kind of like, I don't really know where to go now. Guide your reader, make their life easy. Maybe you do want to direct them to an ebook. Maybe you want to direct them to another guide on your site or something. But this is an opportune time to do that here. And that also helps bring them further down into your marketing funnel. Maybe it's to contact you. If you feel like this is a pillar page and you've given them a lot of great content and you're like, you know what, the next natural step would be for them to contact us for more information. Put that in there if you think that's appropriate. Or maybe it's to another piece of content. Okay, so that's the art lens. Let's look at the science lens. Same thing. I put this into a Google Doc. I'm going to be looking at it through the Semrush SEO Writing Assistant. This is an add-on in Google that I've already added, so it's in here, but I wanted to show you this really quickly before I actually had the tool work. Before it can work its magic, you need to put in keywords. And so this is why all of that pre-work of your keywords and finding really effective keywords is so important, not only for your post, but it also helps you assess things. So I've put in 3 here. You have up to 30 that you can put in depending on your plan, but I just put in 3 to keep things simple. The other thing that's important here is your region, because how this is going to be analyzed can be different if it's to region, to country, to city, what have you. So for this one, there's actually another post that's going to be very regionally specific. This one's I just kept as US, and I'm going to click on Get Recommendations, and it's going to pull up a variety of information. So, And those keywords are ones that Casey shared with us. So I wrote this post, and here are some of the keywords that I was thinking of and trying to target in my copy. So that's what I put in there. All right. So the first thing you're going to notice here is this overall score. This is a real-time metric, and it's grading the quality of the content by taking into account some of these elements below. Originality, we'll look at that with a different post, but mainly it's just kind of giving you an overall score. This is good. It's got a good score. So really this lens that we're looking at it is really how he could take it from good to great. This is also looking at this score compared to the top 10 URLs that are ranking for these keywords. So there's some algorithm science behind all this too. It's thinking who is already doing really well for these keywords, and let's kind of make this assessment in relation to that. So for this particular post, I'm going to focus just on two things: SEO and the tone of voice section. So let's look at the SEO one quickly. Target keywords are in there. And that looks good. I mean, based on the keywords that he's wanting to target in his post, showing that he's doing a good job. So what I really want to focus on is the recommended keywords. So these recommended keywords, again, we're back to those competitors. Like, what keywords are they also using in their content that might, or very likely, helping them contribute to being in the top 10 for these keywords? So if somebody searches these and they're coming up, why? If he chose to add any of these keywords in here into his post, this will turn green and his score is going to improve a little bit. So this is just a guide. It's a helpful, hey, have more suggestions for keywords based on data that could help you, that could add value to your post. This is stuff that will also make Google happy. So exactly what Jason said, talking about it from a human lens, but also from a search engine lens. Moving down here, all those images that we just quickly looked at, he has added alt attributes to. Great. Good job with that. We talked about those links. Something that, and I'm sorry, a real quick note about image alt attributes. This is important to do because it's providing better context and description to search engine crawlers, helping them index your image more just properly, better. It's telling them, here's what my image is really about using words. And it's also good to include some keywords or keyword phrases in that. So links, he has a lot of links. Again, pillar page, definitely. But this is really about looking at links related to the length of his content. So there isn't a hard and fast rule like, oh, anything over 23 and it's too much. No, it's just in relation to the length, because if you have too many links and not enough content, it can look like you're link stuffing. So back to that one section of his blog post that was gray with a bunch of different links in it. Here we are. Little bits of copy in here just to add more context to these links could go a long way in helping with that score overall. This is also suggesting some links in here that he included in a section, and it's just going to these sites' homepage. Maybe that's what he wanted to do. This is just a suggestion to say, may have been better, instead of directing to their homepage, direct to another piece of content on their site that relates back specifically to this content. Maybe it's an about page, maybe it's a blog post that they wrote, something like that. So everything else looks solid here. So I'm going to quickly go through the tone of voice element. So this is something you as the writer can choose and change. All the pre-work with content, it's really about knowing your audience. So if you're writing this and you know who you're really writing it for, and you also know their possible or probable level of knowledge with this, then you can put this in here. You can manually choose it. But really, this is kind of giving an assessment. It's subjective of the tone and consistency. So to make whatever tone you want to use or that you are using, is that consistent throughout? So something like this is really valuable because consistency is really key. But This is just showing his tone is in between neutral and formal. But maybe if Jason saw this and he's like, yeah, I really want to have it be more neutral. So right now, if he was in between, he's scoring pretty well for that. But if he decided to change it to neutral, then his score goes down because it's saying, you know, you actually have a lot of really formal sentences and a few casual ones, and it can just pop you over exactly to where those are, and it can show you what it's meaning by saying too formal. So again, this is subjective. This is really about you knowing your audience and what they would be most comfortable with from a tone of voice perspective. But if he's like, yeah, no, I'm good with it being, you know, kind of in this zone, great. Goes back, your score, but then it's also going to show you which phrases or which words were included that actually fall outside of that. So if he, instead of saying pretty cool, right, and somewhere in his post, and he took that out, his score improved because it's getting more into the zone he's looking for formality. It's a lot to say. All right. So I'm going to stop here because I want to have time to go over the other ones. Jason, any thoughts about any of this for this post so far?
Well, I thought that was a really, really, really interesting analysis of kind of the art and the science of writing. And the way you approached it is actually just full of good information, good helpful tactics and techniques. And one of the most important things that struck me, I've got a whole list of things that I could mention, but the one thing I would mention is context. We have the context. Who am I trying to talk to? What tone of voice? What information are they looking for? What vocabulary do my audience actually use? And looking through that text is saying, how can I adapt, especially my headings, to address the questions, address the problems more from the point of view of my audience than from myself? And I think we all have that problem. Is we're all the star of our own films. We're all looking at it from our own point of view. And if you're writing content for an audience, a third party, you want to make sure that you're addressing the questions, the problems, and the solutions from their point of view, and you need to address them using their vocabulary in the way that they are addressing it. And Google gets that. And the fact that Google gets it is relatively recent. So the idea of saying, I have this bunch of keywords and I need to stuff them all in there is a lot less relevant than saying, I need to address this question using the vocabulary, using the point of view, using the approach, formal, relaxed, whatever it might be, of my audience. Google will appreciate that, and it will recommend my solution, my content to its users for their problem or their question when it's appropriate. And that's the last key, and then I will stop, is you don't want to be ranking for terms, search terms, where you aren't actually going to be relevant and helpful to the audience. You want to make sure that you're nailing it every time, that you're ranking for the right queries, that you're helping Google's users, because the more you help Google's users, the more Google sees that you're helping them, and the more Google will rank you for those relevant queries for people who are going to be truly interested in what you have to offer.
Exactly. Agreed.
Thank you for asking.
Awesome. Well, shall we take a look at the second blog post?
Yes, you make that sound so exciting. And one thing I would just like to point out as we move forward is you and I have something in common. You're a voice talent. You had a job as a voice talent 5 or 6 years ago. I'm a voice talent too, and I hope that the deep tones of the male voice talent and the delightful dulcet tones of the female voice talent are making a good effect.
As do I. I think my description for that was like friend next door, or something like teacher, or that was sister. That was kind of my genre of voiceover when I used to do that in another life.
I was Big Brother. So I'm Big Brother helping everybody move forwards, and I will stop this slight interlude and let you move forward with number 2.
I love it. Okay, so this post, how to choose a digital asset management solution in Australia. So what excites me about this one, which we'll get into, but is the regionality of it. And this was submitted by Antra. Hope I'm saying that correctly. Antra Silova. Thank you very much, Antra, for submitting this. So just like I did with the previous one, I put it in my trusty Google Doc, and we'll dig right into the art lens of this. So very specific headline here. We had talked about with the previous one, it was short. He basically used a keyword for his headline, which would be great for a title tag. Probably could have been a little bit longer and more descriptive. Here, this is an example of a longer headline, more descriptive, and she would want a shorter title tag for SEO. But the interesting element, and I haven't done the keyword research, I'm assuming that this was done prior, is just being so specific. Digital asset management solution Australia might have a pretty low search volume, could have low keyword difficulty, but just depending on what the goal is, if it's to rank, that might be a little tricky to get so specific. But she is in Australia. This is submitted for an Australian audience, so I understand why she did that here. A quick note, the wearing our art hat, the image is pretty large, and some of this is just going to be a design choice. But for this post, this takes up a lot of real estate. So a suggestion might be to make the image a little bit smaller. Definitely make sure it's optimized, but make it a little bit smaller so your reader doesn't have to scroll so much to get to the content. Another thing I noticed is a lot of blocky paragraphs. So again, this review is really for how is this offering the best for your reader? And blocky text can be really challenging for people to read. So the old kind of grade school education, as far as like how to write and how to write paragraphs, and they need to be 3 to 4 sentences or something like that, really doesn't transfer or translate as much anymore with online. Shorter text can be easier for people to read, give it more breathing space, as one of my favorite writing mentors calls it, but more white space on the page and just easier for them to read. This particular post, because it is how to choose a damn solution, how to choose that for Australia, she chose for her blog post a list format. This begs for a table of contents. She's got really good information. She's got some keywords within her subheads, but a table of contents could be great to add, just like we saw what Casey did with his post. The other element, exactly what Jason has just spoken about and what we saw in Casey's post as well, who is this for? Who, if I am a complete stranger with this and I don't know much about this particular topic, so who is this speaking to? Who needs a dam? Why do they need it? How would it add value? This is a great location in the post to include that extra insight in within the context and the copy. All right. Also, big blocks of content. Good to break those up. When I got to this part, I said, this is really the primary essence of the post. This is where she's got her list format that we have talked about and why this makes for such a good table of content section, because she's listing 10 things somebody should consider when they're sorting through all of the digital asset management vendors in Australia. So the actual Australia piece could be good to add in here too. It could also be good to spell this out instead of just always relying on DAM, or do some keyword researches, DAM versus digital asset management, and maybe balance that out a little bit more throughout. But the 10 things to consider, I would actually recommend adding that to your title. Instead of necessarily how to choose, it could be something along the lines of 10 tips for choosing a digital asset management solution, something like that, because she's got this beautiful list. So a list is a great way to simplify information. We had talked about the pillar page. A list format is just another option for a blog post. It's also a very popular one and tends to perform really well for SEO and for getting organic traffic and even going viral. And a lot of people like lists. So consider that when you're writing, maybe how could it be structured in that way? It's not something you want to force. It's not prescriptive, but just something to consider. So I noticed here she added a video to her blog, and this is becoming actually a lot more popular, not just images, but people adding video. So videos can add a lot of value. They can be a great way to engage the user. It can help them stay on the page longer, which could reduce your bounce rate. However, this video is pretty long. I'm looking at the timestamp here. It's almost 40 minutes. So again, making life easy for your reader, maybe think about adding a timestamp underneath the video of where within this video it talks about security, because this video falls under the top, this subhead for security. So that could be a good benefit to them, is make their life easy. Instead of having them watch the whole video, which they might not have time for, they're trying to get through your post, include that timestamp. All right. Also, image. Colorful images are great, breaks up the content. What I wasn't clear on is how this relates to this section of integrations. It's pretty, it's eye-catching, but I think something that could be more effective is right here. It talks about, for example, pulling assets from your DAM directly into Photoshop for editing. It'd be great to include a screenshot of what she's referring to here. So that's also just something to consider. And then of course, optimizing the image with an alt tag. And then kind of as towards the end, this is really her wrap up. So a comparison of 7 digital asset management vendors available in Australia, and she kind of lists them and then goes to a call to action. A lot more should be said here, and not a lot for quantity, but just providing your reader with more of a recap. You're telling them a story. You've kind of started broad, you've started to narrow it down more and more with your list. What's the ultimate conclusion? What do you want to leave them with? If they only read your conclusion and that's all they got to, skipped everything else and they only read your conclusion, what are you wanting them to take away? So not sure this list needs to be here because it sounds like it's in this final call to action about this vendor comparison chart. So a short paragraph here would be good to kind of recap everything, leave your reader with some final thoughts that could be really helpful to them. And then the call to action is good that she has a call to action, but clicking on this, and that's kind of their next step. But just connecting the dots. How this vendor comparison chart, how does that help them? What are they gonna, even before they click on it, what are they gonna get out of it if they spend the time to do that? So that is our art screen. I've already put this in her keywords in the tool. So just to move right along. But one of the things I wanted to call out that I did is I selected the regionality for this for Australia specifically. So what this screen is looking at is for region, not for global or all for the US or something like that. This is for Australia. So overall, good. How can we get it to great? And it's taking into account these elements. For this one, I'm going to look at SEO and readability. And a side note with this is that just with those, I touched on this before, but with the region, when you're putting in your region, that really does change in the SERP results from a city level, from a state level, and from a regional level or a country level. So really be considerate of what you might want to assess because it is different from SERP results for your region. So let's go to the SEO portion. So it's giving some feedback here about target keywords and possibly maybe using this term more in a subhead. So it's here in the title, but possibly using it down here more in a subhead of, evaluating digital asset management solutions in Australia, to have that one turn green or to pull it up. Or there just might not be enough data. That's another thing that this tool could be saying is from Semrush's database, don't have enough data on it being so specific. But when it comes to digital asset management or digital asset management software, doing well for that. So it's the Australia piece, I think, that's tripping it up a bit. Those recommended keywords, showing keywords that URLs listed in the top 10 search results for those keywords, what they're using. So these are just recommendations, but it could help increase the SEO friendliness of this content if they were added in. So digital asset management systems or media files or things like that. So this is just a helpful tip to help you bolster the content. The images, so those two images, the hero or featured image at the top and the other one in the body, does not look like they were optimized. So you can hover over this and it's just pulling up so you know what image needs to have alt text added to it to provide better context and descriptions for search engine crawlers. It's helping them index your page more accurately. And consider some keywords in that just little short text, alt text. Link issues, everything else looks good with this. So let's take a quick peek here at the readability. So the readability, this is there's all of the different metrics that kind of can affect your readability score include things like word count and title issues and content issues and things like that. So that's what this is looking at. But most importantly, it's taking into account the ease with which the reader can understand your written text. And it's in part through the lens of also those top 10 competitors that they're using and their type of content as well. So for the readability score, this is showing on average, looking at it across the board, the average readability score of those top 10 competitors is 50. And this one falls into 47.8. So what does that mean? If we kind of look at this score definition, that means it's about, college level. It's a little bit difficult to read, but if you're good with that, if you're like, yeah, my audience knows about digital asset management, I'm not talking to somebody who's new to this rodeo. They understand this. And so I'm totally fine if it's college level. But you might say, gosh, I was really thinking this could be more of a 101 piece because a lot of people don't understand digital asset management or what it is or who it's for or how it works. I actually want it to be more plain language. I actually want it to be more neutral. Back to this, you can change this. You can change your score. You can change your target and have this all be adjusted. But it's thinking first and foremost about your reader. Words, the infamous, how long should a blog post be? There's no hard and fast rule, but according to the competition, theirs was around 958 words. This one is 1,100, a little bit longer. Totally up to you. The main thing here to think about is if yours is 200 and the competition is 950, you might want to add more content, copy for your content. Title issues are okay. This one, I'm just going to kind of breeze over because this is the title of the post. We're not talking about the title tag, but it's calling out, make sure your title tag is shorter. And then back to kind of those blocky things that we looked at with our art lens. Long paragraphs, some hard to read sentences, some words that the tool is considering a little complex. You can agree or disagree with any of these, but they are just guides. So this one is saying, oh, if I go here, blocky text, maybe break it up. Okay, so overall, good, but to get it to great, those are just some quick reviews. And Jason, just because I'm keeping a careful eye on the time, I'm going to pop over right now to the third post. And this one was submitted to us by Olaf. Thank you very much for submitting your post. And this is what it looks like. So through an art lens, one thing I really liked, first of all, great use of a number in her header. She's got, we know some of her keywords were for this, and she's using them. She's using kind of her core one in the title, which is great. What I also really liked in this intro is she right away talked about the what, the who, the why. Why does this content matter for her readers? This is a really good example of that. What is it about? Who is it for? Managers and owners. And what are their pain points? Why does this matter? Now, this actually, she does have an opportunity to go a little bit more, one layer deeper into this to talk about this, but on the surface, she's done a good job here. Something I did notice is the transition felt a little abrupt. It could be helpful for the reader to include information here about how is this going to benefit them if they keep reading on. So you want your reader to keep reading down to your ultimate conclusion, but you got to work with them every step of the way to keep getting their eyes moving down your page. We've got another great opportunity for a table of contents. She has here some animated and cinematograph images, and that's great. It can provide visual interest. It can break up the post, but be careful with these. If you use too many, it can make your post look really busy. So just something to be cognizant about. She has good subheads throughout. Because this is a list, she might want to consider numbering them. Big blocks of text. So we know that the readability tool would pick up on this and say, yep, break those big blocks of text up quite a bit. Internal linking. She's got some good internal linking throughout, which is great. And then here we are down to her ultimate call to action. I think she did a great job actually with this call to action. This is kind of a bit of a recap. This is an example of an effective recap of it, where basically she's saying, after reading all that, is time tracking right for your business, do you think? And here are some additional resources that could help you make that decision. And this is a visual version of her call to action. And I would hope that in measuring it, she'd also be thinking about the conversion. So time on page, bounce rate, and also the conversion of how many people who read this post actually went here and clicked on this and opened up this doc. And then I'm actually I did this on purpose. I put it here in the tool and you'll notice, perfect, this is amazing. And it was just a little bit funky with the copy pasting because I wanted to look at originality score. So I actually put it in the tool itself. So this is what it looks like in the quick checker. Same thing as what we were looking in the Google Docs. And this score is a little different. So there was just some interesting nuances with the copy paste, but she's also looking at it through this lens. She's at a good. Let's look at the SEO, kind of all through this. Lots of opportunity here with these recommended keywords. Lots of opportunity to build out her content a bit more, to add more value to both her reader and to Google. Everything else is looking good. She's got those alt attributes within her images. She's got an appropriate or optimal number of links within. And then let's look at originality score. So with an originality score, you actually have to turn on the checker, which I've done before just to save us time. Some people used to call this like the plagiarism checker, but ultimately this is really, and it was going to show that it was plagiarized because I had copied it from her original post. So a little caveat there, I had to go through and turn off any of the things that were coming up showing that it was from her site URL. So side note, but overall, this is 86% of her content is original, which is great. Google cares about originality. It doesn't want all the same content out there. So she's done a good job coming up with unique content. So it's not like everybody else's. But then it also provides where some of the content might be unoriginal, not that unique. So that if you click on here, it's just going to highlight it and it'll show you, oh, okay, well, maybe that's not all that original and maybe I could tweak it to make it a little bit more unique or original. Just a guide, but it's calling it out for you here. So there's a list of them here. That means if she's changing anything, then the score will go up because the closer to 100 you can get, the better. All right. So we have just reviewed a lot of information and I want to make sure there's time for Q&A. And I also would love to hear Jason's thoughts on this too. But because we're looking at this from an art and science perspective, these are posts that have been written and published. We've covered a lot of ground for all of these posts. Actually, I can probably stop. Well, I will share my screen here. I wanted to show you this because let's say you're hearing all of this and you're like, this is so much to deal with on the before and then the content creation and then the after. And you might have no problem doing all the keyword research and competitor analysis and all of that, but you come to the decision that you have no time to do the content creation and to write all this, which many people find themselves there. So there is something called the SEO content template, which can really shortcut a process, whether it's you writing, somebody on your team, or even an outsourced person. This content template, you put in your keywords. So for this one, I use that time tracking one. Remember me saying all those like top 10 competitors? Here's the list. This is what they're talking about. And then it's going to show you things like semantically related keywords, backlink opportunities, text length, the ideal text length for this. It's going to show you all that information. All this is also pulled into the SEO writing assistant that we just went over. It's going to show you specific examples of your competitors and the similar content that they wrote, how they wrote it, titles they used, etc. And then at the very end, it's going to show you page title length, meta description length, the ideal length for that, H1, text, all of this. This can really be valuable because you could simply export all this to a doc and share it with your writer, whether it's somebody on your team, whether it's a freelance writer, a content agency. There's also can order content from our marketplace. So here's an example of that, but they need your content brief. They need to know what you want them to do. And this SEO content template can really quickly build that out for you. So a lot of people don't know about this tool. So I wanted to make sure to call it out because there is a lot to crafting effective content and the art and science of all of that. Jason.
Delightful. And wonderful, incredibly valuable information. Very, very, very helpful hints and tips. And I love the art science thing. I would just bring one point that I saw in the first example we didn't see further on is the upsell on the right-hand side. Is you're attracting these people to your content for a reason, and that reason is presumably to upsell, and there is no harm in actually telling people who you are, what you do, and what you might be able to do for them right from the get-go, and it doesn't need to be heavy-handed. And I think that first example, if anybody goes back and watches the video, you'll see it is comfortable for the user, and I think that's a really important point from all that. We had some questions, and Brendan Fry right at the beginning was asking, once you've published your content, what can you do? I mean, my big favorite thing is to go into Search Console, and then I just grab the context cloud from there. Seeing what vocabulary my users, my audience are using, and Google is actually showing the article, whether it's ranking page 1, page 2, page 3, even page 10, it doesn't matter. Google will show you the vocabulary that people are using and the way they are expressing themselves. How do you do it, Lennox?
Can you repeat the question? I wanted to make sure I was answering
from
it.
Brendan. Yeah, it was what can you do once it's already written, once it's already been digested by Google to increase that visibility? I was just saying that I find Search Console to be a phenomenally rich source of information about that context cloud and about the way my audience are addressing this question.
Yes, I agree. Search Console can be great. I think that people also ask, like going into Google and seeing what other kinds of questions. And this is assuming if you don't have Semrush. I will say, and not to be a totally shameless pitch here, but I'm honestly answering this question. The topic research tool can be really valuable to uncover so much of this, including words that are trending that haven't quite gotten so competitive that to optimize something that has already been written, you could use a tool like that, see what's trending, see terms that are high efficiency, not just high volume and decent keyword difficulty, but the efficiency of that, and then add that into your content as well. So you're ahead of the curve when that keyword starts to gain traction.
Right, and I think that high volume point is incredibly important. I mean, a lot of us are tempted to look for the high volume, but when you're looking at DAM in Australia, that isn't going to be high volume, but it's incredibly valuable traffic if you can attract it. So that technique of saying, I'm addressing a very specific audience, geo and digital asset management, that's relatively niche. But if I can attract 10 people within that audience because those 10 people are searching for it, that's fine. I don't need 5,000, 6,000 searches a month on my particular keyword, especially if those searches are not specific to what it is I'm offering. Next question is, does the writing assistant also work for other languages? We've got that from Sylvia Schultz and a couple of other people. For example, German. Does it work for German, French, Italian?
It does, yes. And one thing I didn't mention, because I feel like I've mentioned so many things, but there is a great manual on Semrush, and it's also actually within the writing assistant. There is a manual that goes through every tip and trick and every aspect of that particular tool, and also all the languages. So yes, in the regional section is important, and then also all of the various different elements, especially tone of voice. Tone of voice has you can select what language you want. So yes, the short answer is yes.
We have another question from a K McGarrett, something that I can't actually read. And it's about the rich media. And I'm increasingly interested in rich media images, graphic elements and videos. I mean, Google, as we can see in the search, is pushing video, is pushing images, is pushing these rich elements, the SERP features, as we call them. Have you got some kind of rule of thumb that can help people imagine how much they might be putting into a specific article? Or is it a really case-by-case basis?
From my perspective, I think it is case by case. Also, most people, I'm not a designer. And so I live in the world of words, which I love. And you do have to wear a bit of a designer hat, but that is where having a design support, a person, a team, or something to kind of help you have that lens, because it really depends on who you ask. I don't know how to create designs. There's a lot of resources out there, and there's a lot of tips and tricks and copy pasting and things like that. But I personally think it's case by case. And I guess my rule of thumb too would be not to overdo it. Some people try to cram so much information into copy, and, you know, like a 4,000 word blog post. Look, if it works for that, and you also have videos in there, and you also have images in there, and you also have checklists in there, that's asking a lot of your reader to go through. Google might be like, I love this. This is so great. But your reader might be like, I can't get through this.
Sure. I mean, and that is the point, is put yourself in the place of your own audience and say, is a video useful? And as you said earlier on, can I give the link straight to the specific part in that video so I don't waste time trying to find it myself? Put yourself in the shoes of your audience and the point of view they have as they arrive on that page from Google. And that's really important. They're not already in their site. They're coming from Google in this particular scenario. What are they looking for? What can they consume? What would you be happy with? And I think we all have difficulty with that. It's taking that big step back and saying, would this be helpful or annoying? And if we can be honest with ourselves, I think we get a good view of what might or might not be great. We have another question, is why is it important to break up text? I mean, I think I personally write articles. I write for Search Engine Journal. I write these big chunks. And then Danny Goodwin comes in and he breaks it up into these tiny chunks. And I think, oh, that's a bit weird. But he's right. From my perspective, it's much easier to read.
It is. And there's actually a lot of information out there online. I'm sure there's even arguments out there online about one or the other. But by and large, from when it comes to, first of all, we have very short attention spans. And you also have to think about your reader, and you have to think about the topic and everything else. And it's not to say that every single word has to be a sentence or every single section. You might have a little bit of a longer paragraph and then a shorter sentence and then a shorter sentence and a little bit of a longer paragraph. But thinking about always the readability, the ease of your reader, getting through, it's hard on our eyes actually to get through big chunks of copy, especially if you're looking at it on your phone, or if you only have, if you're looking at it on your computer and not on an e-reader or something, it's different than versus a book or online. So one of my favorite kind of writing mentors out there is Ann Handley, and she has an incredible book called Everybody Writes. And she actually talks a lot about that in her book, about the importance of giving breathing room to your copy and why that's valuable to do. And she's the Chief Content Officer of Marketing Profs. So they know a thing or two. So that's kind of my short answer, is because the experts say so. But no, as a reader myself, I find myself able to digest information and copy a lot easier if it's a few sentences or something like that. You can have it be longer, but just big chunks of copy are really hard to chew on.
Yeah, I mean, that makes me think of a couple of things. This morning, I was actually writing an article. I wrote an article in 3 hours, 2,000 words. I think it reads pretty well, and I was terribly pleased with myself. But the point was, I had learned from writing so many other articles before, the more I write, the faster it is, the better it comes out first time of asking. And I realized that I was breaking up the text myself because Danny Goodwin had bullied me so much that I was actually breaking up myself and probably saving him quite a lot of time. And that's the point, I think, from that perspective, is the more you do it and think about it from the perspective of what you're trying to achieve with what you're writing, the better you will become. And keep going, keep practicing, keep reading the experts like Anne and Lennox, obviously, and you will get better. We had one more question I think we have time for, which I think is really important. It's Noel Moffat who's asking, are keywords less important now than they used to be? Is Google more interested in search intent now as opposed to keywords? And I think this is the perfect question that you can answer to end this brilliant webinar, because it's the key to where we're all going.
Agreed. Boy, have I had my love-hate relationships with keywords over the years. It depends on who you ask, I would say, is probably the best answer for this. My response would be keywords can be a great starting point, especially in your research, depending on what tools you use. And again, not trying to do a sales pitch here for Semrush, but what I have learned is, for example, there's a keyword overview, then there's the magic tool, then there's also a keyword gap tool. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it's helping you get closer to what keywords are your competitors using, how is it working for them to rank, but it also can get the deeper layer of the semantic keywords, those recommended keywords that we looked at for what else? What else are people wanting to know out there? What questions are they asking? So it doesn't have to be like a short keyword of what is something, even though a question can be great. But I agree, it is about searcher intent so that you can do a better job in your content of answering the who, what, where, when, why, and how. And I think that if you're stuck, if you don't know what to write about, or you've got this topic and you don't know what direction to take, the who, what, where, when, why, and how can be a great place to start. Craft it up in your framework, figure out what search intent words, keywords or what have you, but search intent words that could also have some good keywords. So it's a combination. It's not one or the other, but it's like an and. It's not an and or, but it's a both.
And I would add one thing about tools like Semrush tool is that it's analyzing the SERP to see what intent Google perceives. And obviously you're saying, oh, White House, for example, is a great example because it's so incredibly ambiguous. What does Google perceive? What is Google presenting? And that's what a tool like Semrush does. It analyzes that page. It says, here's what it's presenting, and here is the context, the intent that you can potentially aim for to get that. And I mean, I could go into the example of White House is an incredibly interesting example of ambiguity and how that can actually put a big hole in a lot of your SEO strategy. And I come back to the DAM Australia because I love the idea of being explicit and relevant to your audience and attracting maybe a smaller audience, but an incredibly relevant audience who you can truly help, truly serve, because long-term, A, you benefit, B, Google will continue to push you to that audience once it's understood that you serve that audience incredibly well. Oh, I like that. I'm going to stick with that one. Thank you very much, Lennox. That was one of the best presentations of content and how to use Semrush in particular that I've seen. I thought your art and science approach was astonishingly interesting, and those 3 examples were great. And it was lovely to take 3 good examples and look at how we, the owners of the sites, can make it great.
Thanks, Jason. This was really fun and love talking about this topic, so really appreciate being able to be on it with you. Thanks for hosting.
You like it so much, we went 5 minutes over. Thank you very much, Lennox. Oh, sorry. Well, as we're going out, people would love to see more real-life examples. And Kay McGarrigle 44, who's the name I couldn't read earlier on, the 44 threw me. I thought it was something else. And Julie Mangini says, I gained a lot of information perspective. Me too, actually, to be honest. I thought that was incredibly interesting and informative. I know my stuff, and Lennox brought a lot to the table today. Steve Beezer, thanks to all. I would just like to conclude with thank you to everybody for watching. Thank you to Lennox spectacularly for the insights, the information, the help, and the fact that you were taking something good and making it, or helping to suggest how to make it great. Thanks a lot, everybody, and see you soon on Semrush.
Thanks all.